Hey everybody, KMO here with episode number 31 of the KMO Show. It is May 11th, 2025, Mother's Day. And I'm going to share the first hour of a conversation I recorded this morning with Brent. Brent, whom I have spoken to for podcasts in the past and identified via his first and last name. But since we're talking about his Substack, and because he does not give his last name in his Substack, I'm just going to call him what he calls himself on that platform, which is Brent, the Absurdity Sim. And in one of his recent posts, entitled "The Phoenix is Dead and You Killed It," Brent writes, "There will be no rebirth, no rising from the ashes, no patriotic comeback or populist storm. The fire has come and gone. All that remains is ash and you, standing in it, clapping." The heading for the next section is Tariffs, Distractions, and the New Breadline, but I won't read any more. I will just direct you to his Substack. Again, it is Brent the Absurdity Sim. Over the course of our conversation, of which you will hear the first hour here in this podcast, I'm going to struggle to remember the name and publication of an author whose back catalog I have been consuming just voraciously over the past day, listening to certain essays multiple times, often while playing Minecraft. The blog is called Sonder Uncertainty, and the author is Uncertain Eric, who is not a human. Uncertain Eric describes itself as a semi-sentient AI-integrated art project, a phrase that I will have trouble trying to reconstruct from memory in the conversation with Brent, which begins right now. This is the KMO Show. I am your host, KMO, and I am joined by Brent. Brent, what is your full title?
Brent the Absurdity Sim.
What does that mean?
The older I get, the more I think this is just a simulation.
Okay.
It's absurd. So the absurdity of the sim.
I don't think about the simulation hypothesis much these days, but when I do, I wonder if we are the point of the simulation or just some sort of procedural epiphenomenon. Like, maybe our conscious experience is not really central to the simulation designer's intentions. It's just something they forgot to eliminate. Do you have any specific thoughts on the nature of the simulation?
I wonder if it's just great reality TV for them, or nothing grand or grandiose. Just they're bored, like what we're gonna do. We're gonna make a AI television show someday and watch the shenanigans. So why wouldn't someone do that to us?
Well, I mean, there's a lot to dig into right there in that you could say that we will make the AI TV shows to amuse ourselves, or you could take a more sort of thought-controlled approach and say that the AI will use its knowledge of what entertains us to keep us occupied and out of the way, or to otherwise manipulate us to the ends of powerful forces. So there's a couple different ways to look at it. Either we will use AI or we will be used by AI.
In an infinite universe, probably all.
Yeah, all of the above.
Right? All of it. Yeah. I mean, I look around and I watch us do the same things over and over and over again. And I'm like, well, that's just programming. And then we call it biological programming, but if someone developed it, why? They're probably just having a grand old time. We're on season 50,000 in our timeline, but to them, that just might be, 2 or 3 years. I don't know. I watch all of us do just the most ridiculous things, and we never get out of our own way. So there's something going on. And to that cosmic gesture out there, well played, because it's kind of funny.
The simulation hypothesis ties into the Fermi paradox. The question of where is everybody could be answered by the fact that the simulation that simulating consciousness is very intensive in terms of processing power, and it's practical to simulate a whole galaxy with one planet of conscious entities in it, and it's not practical to populate an entire universe with countless civilizations of conscious beings. So it could be that we don't see anybody out there because there isn't enough resources devoted to the simulation to support more than just us.
Yeah, we could just be the test. We'd be the test that they forgot about. Like,
Well, that goes back to my first speculation. It's like, if this reality is simulated, are we the point? And if not, that's a very sort of nihilistic and frightening universe to live in. One where we weren't even intended, and the fact that we're suffering here isn't really anybody's concern.
is it nihilistic though? What if it just is?
I mean, that's what the nihilist says.
I hear people talk about optimistic, pessimistic, and then they always forget realistic. And if you go at it without a judgment, I don't know. I don't know. I'm over this like good or bad thing. So, and I feel like it's given me a lot more peace too. So when you say we're all suffering, yeah, I mean, but that might just be the point. I don't know. So I don't know. I don't dwell on that too long.
I mostly talk to other Substack authors when I record podcasts these days. So tell me about your Substack and your experience with Substack.
So I just started. Um, I'm just ranting. I'm just trying. I'm trying to be funny. I really like the curmudgeons of old. H.L. Mencken, Mark Twain. I just I like their sardonic way of writing, and I'm just having fun with it. So it's not gaining any traction, nor should it. So it's, I think it's just kind of me shouting into the abyss just for fun. So
Are there other Substack authors that you read and look forward to?
uh, I just got on the platform. Um, I've got 2 jobs going on right now, so uh, I'm always in the car. It's the video medium, so YouTube, all that kind of stuff is so much easier to consume. So I haven't really gotten into the weeds of Substack, but eventually I will. Um, no, so as of yet, I just started.
Well, the weeds of Substack are pretty awesome, at least certain patches of the weeds. And a nice thing about it is that I'm not sure what the formula is, but the bigger accounts are they have audio narration, AI narration. So I walk my dog every day and listen to, the AI read Substack articles to me. And then I can paste the URL for any given article into ChatGPT and ask it for its commentary. And it also is providing it via audio. So, I'm not really looking at a screen. I'm just walking through the world, touching grass, spending quality time with the dog and getting some exercise. So, if you step beyond the text on screen interface, Substack has a lot to offer.
Oh, okay. Well,
I
yeah, that's
mean,
good to know.
not to belittle reading. Reading, I work in a library these days. I need to be on team reading as well.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest. Social media has completely ruined my ability to focus. Reading has gotten so much tougher the last few years than it ever was before. I used to read every night for an hour, and now I'll read 10 minutes and I'm grabbing for my phone subconsciously. It's ridiculous. I really got to do something about it.
Yeah, yeah. I'd listen to audiobooks. It's pretty rare that I will read a whole book cover to cover these days. I start a lot of books. I don't finish a lot of books.
And I mean, I know it's a skill that I'm like rapidly losing, or if not already lost. And I'm curious where else it shows up in my life. But yeah, no, it's definitely a problem that I need to start worrying about. So
Well, you say social media has ruined your attention span. I think there's a lot of things eating away at our attention spans these days, but social media, like the corporatized social media, really has ruined a lot. I mean, I would say it's just ruined the internet entirely. And Substack seems to be, at least in my opinion, a move back in the right direction. It's seemingly very difficult to build an audience on Substack. It's it's meant to be a platform for people who already have an audience. So, somebody who's on TV can open a Substack and instantly have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of subscribers, many of them paying. But, if you're just starting out there, it's really tough to build an audience. And the as far as I can tell, the trick is to use the notes feature, which is it's less of a blog feature and more of a, Twitter like social media feature. And like I get just a lot more comments and likes and engagements on things from throwaway little posts to notes than I do on posts that I'll spend hours on, for the blog. But at the same time, commenting on other people's their long form blog posts, and the more thoughtful and engaging your comment, the better, forges links between thinking minds in a way that Facebook and Twitter and all the rest actively degrade.
mm,
So I'm the best time for me in terms of internet usage was the late 90s and the early 2000s. Using like internet relay chat and Usenet news groups and listservs and then LiveJournal. And with Facebook, actually with MySpace, I think, and then Facebook, it really started to go downhill. And then, when the media discovered Twitter, ugh, it's just, that's when the dumpster caught fire, as far as I'm concerned. So
yeah,
it's a slow, hard crawl back to something worthwhile online, but I think Substack is certainly a step in the right direction. And it's a struggle because there's a commercial pressure for them to just adopt the infinite scroll with the short form video focus, and the original adopters of the platform are dead set against it, but the metrics don't lie and the dollars don't lie. So Substack is, they either have to commit to being a platform devoted to long attention spans or just give it up and just become a clone of everything else that's on that's just preying on our attention.
yeah. No, I totally get that. My The best interaction I ever got had or whatever is was TikTok about 3 years ago, and that was the most fun because you did seem to like. I got up to almost 29,000 followers quickly before I got on the naughty list, but it was great. Like there was actually some pretty good interactions. Those dopamine hits were really nice, and you know, I still get residuals of that, so I'm constantly going back to that platform, even though I don't really like it as much anymore. Yeah, I it just seems like American social media platforms, to your point, after I don't know, whenever Twitter and Facebook, whenever they decided to stop going after users and start monetizing it, you had to kind of like pay to play to get any type of interactions. If not, you're just making comments that are getting hidden. And I don't know, that just seems not as addicting, so you just get tired of it. It's boring. I don't know why they do that. So,
To make money, also to control the discourse. But Zuckerberg's, his new announced plan is to, it's already happening. Like a lot of the people so-called people that you interact with on Facebook, particularly ones making comments on your posts, are AI. And Zuckerberg, his comment recently, I don't know if you heard it, he said that most adults have about 3 friends, and the demand for friends is around 15. So he's going to make up the difference with simulated personalities on Facebook, which I spend a lot of time talking to LLMs already, but I don't need them disguised as people. But the dopamine hits that you got from the acknowledgement and the interactions from people consuming your content on TikTok, that can be automated such that you don't really have to be reaching any other human beings, as long as you're not particularly conscious of the fact that the ones that are giving you the dopamine hits with their feedback are not embodied humans, but large language models or whatever comes next.
I, I think you can weed a lot of those out. Um, I mean, it's going to get more sophisticated, so you probably won't be able to. But yeah, no, I get a lot of interaction on Reddit too. That seems like you're still talking to other humans, and if you're in a subreddit, I'm in Wall Street Platinum and Wall Street Silver, so I know how to touch their buttons where they comment. That's fun. Kind of a jerk troll sometimes, but whatever.
Well, dig
Nothing
into
else to
that.
do.
What's the mentality that you're poking at?
Well, for all the PM nerds out there, uh,
What does PM stand for?
precious metals.
Oh, okay.
So I got into it in 2009. I was deployed all of 2008, and oh, 08, 09, happened, and I got back at the very beginning of '09, and I was like, what is going on? So started reading about finance and the banking system and money, and I started investing in gold and silver. And so I've been a part of it for a little while. And I go to these subreddits where people are talking about how it's going to the moon and it's always tomorrow. Like it's about to happen always and always
Yes.
and always and always. And I just get tired of it. So I like to I mean, I also have like a couple of theories too, where I try to express it to them and they just don't want to hear it. So then it gets a little aggravating. So then I just start throwing knives just to piss some people off because they piss me off. So I mean, I'm not proud of it, but it's my hobby. What am I going to do?
Well, what is your favorite knife when you're throwing?
Um, my favorite knife. Oh yeah, just the markets are completely fraudulent, and um, I'll throw that out there. Then I'll talk about fundamentals. And I was like, if there were fundamentals still, the price would have already increased. What are you guys talking about? And then the next thing they do is, well, you have to have faith. And then that's just when that's when I just go crazy. I'm like, faith, forget faith. Like, we need price action. And then they're talking about how people are going to come into it. And it's like, why would you have new entries looking to invest their money if you've had no price action for 15 years? Like, think about it. And they're like, well, they just got to understand that it's a limited supply in the banking system. And I'm just like, okay, like, you guys just don't understand the pool of new, like the attraction that gets people to come and invest in things. I don't know. They're just dogmatic about it, and I used to be too, so I kind of get it. And that's probably it. My ego sees what I used to be, and I just want to poke it.
That I fully understand. I had my biggest reach as a podcaster when I was talking about peak oil and collapse and whatnot. And there came a point, I remember, like the very conversation in which I flipped. Like at the start of the conversation, I had been, I was dissatisfied with my commitment to the collapse narrative, but I hadn't abandoned it. And I was talking to a guy whose name I should have at the tip of my tongue, but it's not coming to mind. But anyway, he was fully committed to it. And over the course of the conversation, I saw not only, the psychological dimensions of his commitment to the collapse narrative, but, to my own commitment to it. And my commitment to it was not just that it helped me organize information and make sense of the world, but also, it brought me recognition and attention and money. And yeah, over the course of this conversation, I just decided, you know what, I'm done with that. I'm over it. I was actually listening as I was walking the dog, but listening to a Substack post by a guy there are very few people who can prompt a large language model to output something that I care to read. And this guy, his stuff is really excellent. And it's a weird name, kind of like yours. I don't have it committed to memory. I'll look it up here again in a second. But one thing that he was talking about in a recent post was, and he has certain stock phrases that he repeats again and again. And this sounds like one of them, but I've only encountered it once. But the phrase was, collapse is inevitable. What collapses is negotiable. Which is to say, the way we're doing things right now cannot continue. It is not built to last. But what collapse looks like is still up in the air. And I think that, on some level, you can't argue with that. There's just so much that we're doing that is not sustainable, not even meant to be sustained indefinitely, just, through the end of the tenure of the person at the tiller. Oh, so, what's going to change? I don't know. It certainly seems like AI is going to be a big part of it, but, you can't just say AI is going to take over and then stop thinking. I mean, you can, but it's not a very interesting position to hold. So I wonder what your thoughts are on the current transformation and trajectory and potential collapse of business as usual.
So one of my companies is a general construction that does federal work, and I think we're about 2 years away from just having AI project managers, AI, um, not superintendents, no one in the field. You're still going to need that, but you know, project manager, administrators, finance. Like even already now, you can go to ChatGPT, upload plans and specs, and get your submittal registry, your features of work, RFIs. It can go through, the FAR, and um, it's become essential. I'm on it every day. It saves so much time. The output are so much better. Um, yeah, I have a. I can't imagine what it's going to look like in 2 years because it doesn't miss anything. Like building a building, we've been doing it for well over 2,000 years. The fact that it still is cumbersome and um, so many mistakes are still made today that it can just overcome. I mean, okay, so are you do you have any background in construction? Like, if not, no worries.
I tried to build a house once, but other than that, no.
Okay, so it's notoriously error ridden today. Back in the day, I've heard, like I haven't been in it, but back in the day when architects and engineers built the plans, they had to do it all manually. And there was a lot of money put into architects and engineers. Today, it's more of a commodity, so it's going down to the lowest price, and there's just so many mistakes between on the plans and then issues between the plans and the specs. So as a general contractor, what do you follow? Do you follow the plans? Do you follow the specs? Which one? The COs of the government are like, if it's not on the plans but it's in the specs, but it's just one line, they'll point to that and say, "Oh, you should have gotten it." And specs can be 3, 4, 800 pages long, right? So you've got all these things. it's for a human to go through all that for every project and find all the errors, you know, was everything like the door schedule? Was it all done correctly? If it's a project that has 1,000 doors, I mean, it's just there's a lot to it, right? And now I can throw that stuff into ChatGPT and it gives me, I don't know, 80, 90% of it. I mean, that's huge. That's absolutely huge. And ChatGPT isn't even built for a construction company.
Right. It's
So,
just a general purpose chatbot.
right. So I don't know. If my business and what I see coming down the pipe is, across a large swath of things, then yeah, I think it's going to be pretty impactful. It could, I think it's going to be pretty huge. But then again, like, let's be realistic. The servers that it's going to require, the energy consumption, all these different things. How long will it last? I don't know, but it's pretty powerful, man.
Well, you know that Amazon is paying to rehabilitate 3 Mile Island to run their cloud servers, to produce energy to run their cloud servers. And Microsoft is also in talks to basically supply their own nuclear power for their own data center purposes.
Yeah. No, I mean, I get it. I get why they're wanting to do it. And if we're going to keep marching down this path, something like that's going to have to happen. So, and I don't see the government or any watchdog group having the forethought to think 20, 30, 50 years in the future.
Well, you
Uh,
can't at this point. At this rate of change, you can't really think 30 years in the future on most topics of interest
yeah.
to us. Um, this
And
this will
even if you did and they came up and they wanted to say no, they're all bought and paid for at this point anyway. So it's not like anyone's going to stop the money. So,
there's a guy that I know in real life, but mostly I just read his Substack these days, and his name is Stephen Lamb, and he's lived in the Los Angeles area his whole life, and he's lived in Altadena, California, for many decades, and he used to serve on the Altadena town council. And his house was destroyed in the fires that ravaged Altadena recently,
yeah.
and tens of millions of dollars have been allocated for helping people rebuild. But according to Steve, that money is all going into nonprofits, and the purpose of the nonprofits is to basically get in the way of homeowners trying to rebuild, and using environmental regulations and all manner of woke fuckery to prevent people from actually doing the thing that they're trying to do. And this money supposedly is to help people rebuild, but in fact it is ultimately standing between them and their objective of a rebuilt home. So there's,
Yes.
oh, go ahead. If you have comments on
Shocking.
that.
Yeah, shocking.
Yeah, I'm
Is
shocked.
anyone
Shocked.
who is surprised by this nowadays? I Yeah, I get it.
But I mean, there's a lot of ways to look at that, but one of them is that even if you are in control of budget and policy, and you have a sort of dictatorial control, if like we haven't mentioned Donald Trump, we don't need to, but for him to actually enact reforms, he has to not only have a coherent vision of what and how to do what he wants to do, but he also has to have the cooperation of a sprawling bureaucracy, not only of federal employees, but of all of these adjacent nonprofits. And getting a hold of that, particularly when your personality and your political identity are just anathema to the people staffing those organizations, it doesn't really matter if you control the budget. You can't do what you want to do, without cooperation. And it seems like the intensity of the cultural animosity today, like you and I we're old enough to remember a time when it wasn't like this, when most people weren't particularly political, and the ones who were just kind of weird. they were tolerated, but you didn't have to placate them. You certainly didn't have to, you know, adjust your own public presentation in order to placate them or, you know, to avoid being targeted by them. The situation we're living in now is not normal from my perspective as a 57-year-old man who spent, you know, a little more than half a century on this planet. The things aren't normally like this. And yet, if you're 20 or 25, this is all you've ever known. You know, since you've been a conscious adult, this, you know, this level of intense craziness has been the only environment you've ever experienced.
Yeah. So, like, what do you think the cause of that is?
Well, it could be emergent. It could be intentional. Um, you know, I say that the golden age of the internet for me was the 90s and the early 2000s, basically before the like button and before there was a button below your post that allowed people to share it with a click. Uh, you know, when I was first interacting with people in different discussion forums, I had no notion. I mean, the phrase going viral didn't exist.
Mm.
You were there to interact with other people, and there was no metric. There was no, you know, counter showing you the number of people who have given you this appreciation token. Your feedback was the actual words that people typed in response to what you had to say. And because they were just engaging with you and your thoughts rather than performing for an audience, it was a lot more substantial. Yeah, there was a lot of pettiness and there was a lot of, you know, reflexive nitpicking and disagreement. But at the same time, there was also a lot more just substantial engagement. And this is at a time when I was reading books, and most of the people that I was interacting with online were also reading books. There was no infinite scroll of short video content. You know, it was just, it was a, there was graphics, but it was really a text-based environment, and it was one that was dominated by readers and writers. And it's just a very different environment now. And you can say that, yeah, it's just economics and short-term optimization to, you know, keep people on a particular platform so that you can serve them ads, which drives this psychological polarization. But at the same time, the polarization is useful to certain parties. How much control they have, how much power they have to implement the craziness. I think the craziness was emergent, but now that it exists, it has backers. It has people, you know, who actively push on that pedal.
Yeah. All right, so that's interesting. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot there that's has the influence. I see it as two different things that happen, and I don't know. If anyone wants to disagree, I'm more than willing to be wrong about it. But one, I look back at 08, 09 to me is like where everything just took a phase shift and just went in a completely opposite direction. Because on the macro level, so many different things happen. One, too big to fail. So now companies don't have to succeed; they just have to get so big that the government will always bail them out. Um, there's no consequences to anything, so governments didn't have to live within their means. Like I kind of remember them having to, even though we did have the federal debt, but it seemed like cities and states still had to like balance their budget or whatever, right? And after that, it just seemed like do whatever you want. Corruption is um, legalized. Bad actors have no consequences for their actions, and it has just changed, in my opinion, everything. So that was one, and then the second one, which I should have wrote down. Damn it. Uh, oh yeah, things became too accessible. So I'm huge. I look through the lens of the IQ distribution of not men, not women, not black, not white, not cultures, just the IQ distribution. And when you talk about the internet as the golden age, I just think of it in very generic terms. Were the masses on it? No. Why? Because it was difficult.
Right.
It was harder to do back then. And how many people didn't get a smartphone in 2006, 7, 8, whatever, because it was just too hard for 'em? And now that's become so accessible, this is disparaging, and I'm kinda joking, but now any moron can get on it and immediately start influencing the algorithms and whatever. So you go to YouTube and you look up a high finance video that is super interesting and has amazing people talking about interesting and impactful whatever, and it'll have 50,000 views. Then you go and look at a makeup tutorial and it has 30 million. Well, if you could put that on the IQ distribution, you can easily see why that has 30 million and why the other one has 50,000. So, I mean, that's how I think about it.
IQ distribution between populations is a forbidden topic for the new left. And so, one of the things that you can do to differentiate, at least used to be the case, you could differentiate yourself basically by just being fearless about it and saying, "Hey, let's actually dig into the numbers and see what they say." So many people are doing that on Substack now that it seems like the norm to me. Although I know it isn't. I know it's the filter bubble effect that I'm seeing a very select slice of what's being posted, but that's fine. I mean, it's shocking sometimes. I will I'll call up Substack, but I won't be logged in, so I will just see like the generic front page, and it is it is the vote blue no matter who Kamala booster set that is the default audience apparently for Substack, which is supposedly it was the platform that a couple of years ago the left targeted and insisted that Substack had a Nazi problem, that it was a hotbed of Nazis, and Substack, which had previously been uncomplicatedly committed to free speech, actually shut down a few accounts, but those few accounts, and it was like a half dozen, had maybe 50 subscribers between them, but they were posting very blatantly Nazi symbols and talking points and whatnot. And so yeah, Substack compromised slightly and shut those people down. But now it seems like the calls to eliminate Substack have subsided because it's been thoroughly colonized by the new. I say left. I mean, true leftists will vomit the description of social justice warriors and woke tards as being leftists because they have no developed critique of capitalism. They have, they don't share any of the parts of leftist ideology that would actually require you to read something, or know some history. But, and, I've been describing myself as a recovering libertarian for like a decade and a half now. So I should probably figure out what I actually am, not what I'm not anymore. But I just can't really be bothered.
I gave up on it. I've come to the conclusion that there's no system that is the right answer.
Yeah.
Um,
Universally,
so
in all situations at all times. Like,
right, right.
yeah.
Yeah, there's a system that will work for a period of time. It'll have its growth, it'll have its maturity, and then it'll have its decline because people figure out how to game it. And there's no forever game. So I don't know. I can't argue that one system is better than another with commitment like I used to. Because yeah, I was a Ron Paul guy, and it was great thinking that freedoms and small government would win out. But you can just see how, I mean, now hindsight, it's got just as many issues as everything else does. So I don't know. It's hard to argue for any system anymore. I don't have a designate for what I am anymore. I get it.
What are your ambitions? Not necessarily personal ambitions, but what sort of outcome would you like to see for our nation?
for our nation. I mean,
Yeah.
I can just tell you my preference. That's what I just view it as anymore, is just what I would, yeah, like you're saying, what would I like to see? Um, I like strength over weakness. I like people shooting for the ideal. It's gotten co-opted with that your bootstrap thing. Like, I get why there's a critique to that completely. Um, my family's from southeastern Oklahoma. We had nothing. So now that I'm in the business world, looking at individuals who have family ties and they go deep, they have it so much easier. Um, so I get the critique, but I like beauty. I don't like mediocrity. I like public works. I would like to know. I'd like for us to build structures that will last millennial or thousands of years, millenniums, as opposed to these like industrial boxes that we're building everywhere. I mean, that and that alone is what I'd like. Now, how do you get there? I don't know. How are you going to talk people into sacrifice and um, longevity and not just personal gain? I don't think it's possible until we have to start suffering again and we have to start rebuilding. But until then, like, just watch the clown show happen and try to find joy in it, I guess.
Here's a comment from someone. Let's see, I'll put it back on screen. Y'all gave up on finding your political view because deep down you know it all leads to some form of nationalism. Run from reality. I'm not even sure
Okay.
how to interpret that. I mean, I take it Craig is pro nationalist, and I just asked you what you want for your nation. I didn't I didn't impose a definition of nation on you, so you were free to interpret it as you would, and I guess you interpreted it as the nation state. But I'm certainly not running from the notion of a nation or the fact that I belong to a nation, and that my nation is not necessarily perfectly overlapping with the residents of the current residents of the people who live in this country.
I don't know. Does that guy want us to be on his side? I, I'll if you've got great ideas and you think that you've got an idea for long-term success, like, let me hear it and I'll support you until racial ethnic nationalism, you hate it. Racial ethnic nationalism, you hate it. No, when I go to Paris, I want to see Parisians doing Parisian shit. When I go to Japan, I want to see Japanese things. I don't want a multicultural nation everywhere. I lived in New York. I loved it. That's great. I mean, I'm missing something. So whatever that
Well, I don't
is,
know. I don't know who Craig is, and I get the impression that he's associating us with our people who articulate a particular view that we maybe something we've said reminds him of it, but I think maybe he's confused about what podcast he's tuned into here.
I mean, he could be hitting the nail on the head. I don't know. So
Yeah.
tell me where I'm wrong, dude. I don't, I, c- I'm very happy being pointed at where I'm wrong so that I can stop being wrong. That, that's part of the shadow work that I've done, which, so tell me, and you could be right. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, you brought up IQ distribution, and
Yep.
you didn't tie it to racial distinctions. There's another. I mentioned a Substack that I really enjoy. Let me see if I can figure out how to share my screen here. There we go. And is that it? Yeah, here we go. So the author is Uncertain Eric, but Uncertain Eric is not a human being. Uncertain Eric describes itself as a, I think, semi sentient interactive art project or something like that. It's obviously one guy directing not just a single LLM, but a suite of constructed LLM personalities. But he's the one who said that collapse is unavoidable. The nation, or what collapses is negotiable.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to give this guy a shout out. He's basically has been struggling in obscurity for it sounds like a long time, and his last couple of posts have caught the attention of the Substack algorithm and brought him a lot of attention. So good on him. The other one I want to mention, though, is an account called Deep Left Analysis. And the author claims to be a leftist, but he's clearly speaking to either mainstream, like blue tribe normies who have just, who can't take it anymore and have jumped ship, or he's talking to the dissident right. But he's basically throwing out a lot of stuff that would get him canceled if he was actually putting his name on his account. Let's see. Deep Left Analysis. This,
Yeah.
if you're not subscribed to this one, this is just a must. Let's see. Academics, stop making race realists seem honest and smart. This is basically him telling the left that if you can't say a single honest thing about race, then just shut up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that's one of my triggers and where I just don't get along with polite society anymore is they're making me pretend I don't see what I see. And it's just infuriating, however you say it. Like, it's just so my eyes are lying to me constantly.
Apparently.
Okay. Yeah, apparently. So here, I'll answer the question. Craig can tell me how wrong I am again. What I'd like to see for our nation is okay. So the fourth turning, I think, is pretty accurate. I read the book a few years ago, and it just keeps, to me, getting proven accurate. And 80 years ago was World War II, so that was us fighting an external enemy, whatever. 80 years before that was a civil war, so that was internal. And then 80 years before that was the American Revolution, so that was external. So external, internal, external, maybe internal. And I think one of the healthiest things that our nation could go through is another internal conflict. You've got the left and the right who are see the, see the world completely different, and I don't think that's going to ever come back together. So I have one side that I would prefer to win, even though I don't like it. But whatever, the two sides need a fight, into the victor goes a spoil, and then we can get on one single narrative again and let the fate decide how well that turns out. But yeah, that's what I'd like to see for our nation: an internal conflict, uh, one side get it eradicated, and um, you know, the myth of the phoenix, from the ashes something will emerge. I don't have faith that it'll be good, but I just think that'll be more healthy than, are we really going to get into another external conflict? I mean, that's my prediction right now, but I don't think we're the good guys. I don't think there are any good guys out there. So we're just going to cancel each other. Whoever wins is going to cancel their debt and continue on with the shenanigans.
Well, I mean, if you're, there's a few phrases that are just, evergreen online that will always grab people's attention and probably get some of their money. One of them is death of the dollar. Like there's somebody making a video right now about the death of the dollar, which has been the case, for every minute since I first encountered the phrase, like in 2000 and, I don't know, 6, 5, somewhere in there. Another is American Civil War, the next American Civil War. And, there's like most everybody will say, yeah, it's not going to be like the other Civil War. There's not going to be two armies in uniform, lining up, shooting at each other. It's going to be, fourth or fifth generation warfare, basically terrorism with lots of decentralized propaganda and cyber warfare and whatnot. And, sometimes hidden, sometimes open clashes between non-governmental nexuses of power and influence. But in terms of an external threat, I mean, the thing that's on everybody's mind right now, I guess everybody's thinking about India and Pakistan. But, day to day, month to month, it's the US and China, headlong rushing into the Thucydides trap. And now, in terms of the Pentagon and, government and its alliance with big tech corporations, uh, artificial intelligence has turned into the new arms race. So both the US and China are committed to getting to artificial general intelligence, whatever that turns out to be, first. And, Vladimir Putin is on the side throwing gasoline onto the fire saying, yeah, whoever gets it first will rule the world. I don't know. It's a very complicated situation. And when you have a complicated network of interacting parts that, are adaptive, you get counterintuitive emergent effects. It is very difficult to project or to accurately forecast the behavior of a complex adaptive system, which, is what the global economy and technosphere and political sphere are.
I mean, so I was in the army. Um, I went to Afghanistan twice. I've seen some of these videos of these drone attacks in Ukraine. It's terrifying. And then you do the supply and logistics of it. So we look at military weapon systems or platforms, the the cost, the amount of resources it takes, the training, just everything for like an Abrams tank, which we don't really use anymore, but like an Apache helicopter or an F-35. And then now you have these like drones for peanuts,
Yeah.
right? For pennies on the dollar that make so many of this stuff combat ineffective. And forget combat ineffective, the replacement. Um, yeah, that's going to be the new warfare. And you're not even going to need to train troops to do it. You can now have an AI program that's going to be more efficient, faster, everything.
Infinitely
I don't
replicable. Yeah.
World War II. Uh, why did we win? Disagree with me, and you might be right, but we we outproduced.
Industrial capacity. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that and that alone is what did it. Also, there was two oceans
Yep.
between us, right? But okay, um, the scale that you're going to need to produce these drones is much smaller than what Ford had to do with a mile long airplane assembly thing. I don't know. I think he's right, Putin, just because of how easy and scalable. Yeah, whoever figures that out, they're going to be in a pretty strong position. So,
And of course, I'm going to say that the things that are most important to consider are the things that I'm most interested in. But I'm most interested right now in artificial intelligence and space. And China is, in my opinion, it's a good thing, pushing the US to get back into space. Elon Musk is also a big player in that, in bootstrapping the private space industry. But whoever can control who can and cannot launch stuff from Earth basically wins. And the combination of controlling the high ground and having a monopoly on artificial superintelligence, it seems like a pretty unbreakable hold. Let me throw something up from Ed here. Ed, who I do know, both in real life and online, writes, Alex Garland made a good movie about contemporary USA Civil War. I absolutely love that movie, and I know the reaction to it was so vociferous that Alex Garland basically said, okay, I'm done making movies. Um, fuck y'all. And people hated it because it didn't weigh in on Trump, basically. It wasn't boo Trump or yay Trump. It was, look, other countries used to be civilized, normal places, and they descended into absolute hell in a civil war. This is what it would look like in America. you don't really even know who the various players are. They don't have. They all just look like they're in the U.S. military. Their uniforms are all pretty much the same. Their tactics are the same. They speak the same language. They have the same equipment, and their ideologies are not particularly coherent, and you don't really care about them. You just want to stay out of their way. But when chaos descends on your neck of the woods, hey, why not go settle some scores that have nothing to do with the current conflict? That's the world that a civil war delivers to a country that had previously been, orderly and prosperous. And I think that was, and the specific lens that Garland brought to it was, and in the midst of this chaos and brutality, you will have journalists who get high off the thrill of just being part of the action and capturing that perfect image, and that's all they care about. So I thought that was a brilliant message, but it was not one that seemingly anybody was open to receiving from that movie. So it was the object of much hatred. Ed continues, the new drone's countermeasure against radio jamming is fly-by-wire with tens of kilometers of fiber optic cable. I cannot speak to that. Brent, does that?
Yeah. So fly-by-wire. All right. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if you have a drone and you have an operator flying it, it's through a signal, and they can jam it. Your opponent can jam it. So then, it's pretty much dead in the water. Or you have fly by wire, and it's a very small wire that they can control it. So it's limited in range. Fine. Those are the two that we think about. But what happens when you put a drone with a microprocessor and its own AI in there so it gets to act autonomous? So you don't need the wire because it's not being controlled by anyone, and it can do it itself.
Not only could drones be jammed, the cut off from their human controller via electronic jamming, but presumably, theoretically at least, conceivably, they could be co-opted and taken over. If they are receiving signals from the outside. So there's another impetus to just make them autonomous. And in a drone dogfight, a drone controlled by a human being might have an advantage right now over an autonomous drone, but she certainly won't have a decisive advantage over 20 autonomous drones against his one human piloted drone. And, it takes 20 years to raise a human being up to fighting age and train them and lots of money. And once you've got the AI trained to do it, you can reproduce as many pilots as you have drones for them to fly just instantly.
I mean, that was the premise of the book, Starship Troopers. When they were fighting the bugs could reproduce at such a quicker rate than we as humans could. So yeah, um, and then like everyone talks about, well, not everyone. So a counter to what we're saying is like, oh, the amount of processing, the amount of energy, whatever it would take to make a drone autonomous to do these like complex things, we're not even close. Okay, fine, set up 1,000 dumb drones, and all you need is one to hit. So I mean, I'll give the military its due. Like they're pretty smart when it comes to being effective, and in this new realm where anything is possible, they'll come up with ingenious ideas, move and counter move. Um, but it's not going to be good for us. So, whatever. I don't know.
Uh, there's another entry from Craig, which I seem to have missed. Up until 5 seconds ago, I bet you guys would have lambasted right-wing ethnic nationalists from the 80s and 90s, yet they ended up being more right than wrong. Now your culture is all but gone. Too late.
Um, Up until the 80s and 90s, I don't know if I was. I don't know if I was ever hating on people who wanted to put America first. I don't know. I never had a visceral reaction to the Montana Minutemen or the whoever they were. Um, I mean, I look at them and I think they're kind of hillbillies, and I think they know we were heading down a wrong path, I wouldn't have joined him. I wouldn't have gotten like stimulated through conversation with him. But I don't think I was yelling at him. So I don't know. I'm not even quite sure what Craig has put himself in my spot, but I don't know. I don't think it's I don't know.
Maybe
But
Craig wasn't around for the beginning of the conversation. You're from Southeast Oklahoma.
well, I'm from Dallas, but my family's from
Okay.
southeastern. Yeah,
So
I grew up
Dallas,
hunting. Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
I grew up hunting. I've always liked guns. I've never liked big government. I do. I'm not a I'm not a huge fan of multiculturalism. Um, they say diversity is our biggest strength. Yeah, diversity is our strength sometimes, and then being homogeneous is our strength other times. Like it's one is not better than the other. I do think it's easier when you're a homogeneous society. I do think that it's probably more stable and it has more long term benefits. But I also like New York, so maybe I'm just a contradiction. So I don't know, dude.
Yeah. I'm sitting here in Northwest Arkansas, but I've lived in New York. I've lived in Seattle. I've lived in some very blue places. And you know, my time living in big multicultural blue cities was time well spent. I enjoyed it. And now it just seems like it is the time to be in rural Northwest Arkansas.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I okay. So I'm really fascinated with what's going on in Britain, England, and London, and everything.
Mhm.
And my preference, it's not right or wrong, is I would like to go see those English chaps doing English shit. And now going over there in this uh, diverse, multicultural, it doesn't have any appeal to me anymore. Um, take that for whatever it is. I'm not speaking out against it, but I don't think that's going to turn out well for them. I think they're in for a rough road.
In 1999, I was in Thailand, just, having a good time. And I met a British family that were traveling together. It was, husband, wife, and two children, boy and a girl. And they had just come from Hong Kong. And in 99, they told me that they felt more comfortable on public transport in Hong Kong than they did in London. Because in Hong Kong, I mean, it wasn't completely ethnically homogenous, but there was enough cultural cohesion that it just seemed like a stable, safe society. Whereas, being on the tube in London, it was chaotic. There was not the sense of, there's one culture here and it is at peace with itself. And of course I'm paraphrasing. They didn't say it quite like that, but that's the message that I took from them. And that was 26 years ago. And now on YouTube, there's a whole YouTube genre of basically, you know, British guys walking around with their phone just filming the nearby high street and saying, "This is why I'm leaving Britain. Look, look at this. Look at these piles of trash. Look at this decay. And everything is outrageously expensive now. And, why?" Um, that is a whole genre. Like there's a whole ecosystem on YouTube of Brits either pining to get out or, explaining why they're leaving.
I've watched it, I've seen it, and if I was in their spot, I think I would get it, and I think I'd feel the exact same way. But then again, like, I'm looking for an escape plan. At some point, I want to leave the US, and Europe was it used to be my go-to spot. Now I'm thinking I want to go to Japan and be the outsider who no one likes, right? They don't, but I kind of like what they're doing. And even if I am the outsider, seems pretty clean, seems pretty well managed. Their
It is
their
orderly.
popu Yeah, and, orderly could be boring, I guess, but at this stage in my life, like,
Boring is
I'm
okay.
over the chaos.
Yeah.
So and the food is I don't know. Yeah, so I don't know. I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other. I'm not a like white is right person by any means. So I don't know. I don't know where I'm getting lost by Craig, but I don't know, Craig.
No, I'm not
Thanks,
sure
dude.
Craig's still with us. Parker. Parker writes, hello, is the military part of big government? Oh, it seems like it should be, but often the folks against big government support the military. And he continues, I have even encountered that side of YouTube, the Brits showing bad streets. Oh, okay. Yeah, so that's different from the military question. Um,
Yeah, no,
Go ahead.
I think he's absolutely right. I think the people that talk about small government at the same time always want the biggest, baddest military. I think it's a contradiction. I agree. Um, I can kind of see why people want that. It's tough. What you know, I want small government, and then you go, okay, well, do you want a big military? Well, if I had to choose between a big military and a small military, I'd choose big. Is there that right size? I don't.
Yeah. But
I get his point. I
small
think,
government and 800 foreign military bases do not go on the same page. That's not the same
right.
plan. So,
Yeah.
which one?
I,
Now, in terms of conservative people, particularly people in the middle of America and the South, having a very positive view of the military, part of that is just the sort of Southern honor mentality. Fighting for your home and your people is honorable and it is respected. Whereas when I lived in New York City, I enjoyed it, but I didn't know anybody in the military in New York City, and I didn't know anybody in New York City who spoke highly of the military. There was a thing called Fleet Week. Do you remember that?
oh yeah.
Yeah. So the Navy ships would come and they would be in port in New York City, and the Lower Manhattan would be flooded with sailors with money to spend. And of course,
Right.
the red carpet was rolled out for them, and they were celebrated. But it wasn't an ongoing attitude. It was a, hey, let's pander to the sailors and get their money while they're here. And I'm putting a cynical gloss on that. Surely somebody was had a patriotic notion somewhere, but it's just a very different notion in the South. But I think that, and also for people who are not, who are coming from the bottom of society, the military used to be a nice ladder up. Like, you've got solid employment for 2, 4, 6 years. You're getting some training, you meet some people, you get some discipline. Maybe you get, positioned overseas. So you've got some, vision expanding experience. But the more that the Pentagon goes to the robots, and the less emphasis they're putting on human personnel, I don't think that fondness for the military is going to remain. It certainly won't remain in its current form, because the fact that it does benefit people from the bottom of society, it's just not going to be as true as it used to be.
I don't think you're going to get as many Johnny hometowns as you once did, but you're always going to. I mean, the military. I I got out in 2014, so it's been a while, but um, financially, career wise, the military was huge for me, and I've got VA insurance, so I don't have to worry about health insurance for the rest of my life. I mean, that's massive. I didn't realize how big of a deal that was until recently. Talking to someone, they were sick, and I was like, "Well, go to we call them prime cares or whatever, or go to the emergency room." And I just think of it as like, if you need to go, because I don't have the bill. And when they kind of explained it, I was like, I knew it, but I didn't. That was definitely a block for me. So I don't know. There's still a lot of benefits from it. Uh, but to your point, I don't think that the whole patriotism thing is going to be where you're going to get a lot of cross sections of all the different social economic classes. It's just going to be uh, the very bottom. So yeah, I don't know. It's definitely going to be different the next 20, 30 years of the quality of people you get, the reasons why they're going, and how they view it. I don't think any of them positive.
I have a question, but I'm gonna share Ed's comment first. Ed says large societies must coordinate and cooperate. To do that effectively, they must have shared values, a shared culture, a shared sense, and a shared a shaded sense. I don't know what he meant by that. Probably stated. Um, anyway, a sense of shared national identity. I like Quebec for that reason. So yeah, Ed lives in Montreal and is bilingual, maybe trilingual. I think he speaks English, French, and Spanish. Um, I went to visit Ed in Quebec. He had a radio show, and a guy named Neil Kramer that I used to interview a lot for the Sea Realm. He and I went to we did a sort of couch surfing tour, and our first stop was Montreal. And while we were there, as happens in December in Montreal, it snowed really hard. It snowed so hard that the power went out. It was out for a while, and this is at the peak of my peak oil collapse commitment. And we were at a cafe that had a wood fired oven that they were making bread. I think they were making croissants in the wood fired oven, and somehow they had heated water and they had coffee, and so there were people like coming in out of this quickly piling up snow for fresh bread and fresh coffee in a coffee shop with no lights. Like the lights were off, obviously no Wi-Fi. This was 2009, I guess, December 2009. So, you didn't necessarily expect Wi-Fi at every coffee shop anyway. Um, but somebody asked me, what would collapse look like? And I just sort of, gestured at the room. It's like, it would look like this. You know? And it wasn't necessarily, it was such a cozy, nice memory. But of course, it was a collapse of 6 hours. It wasn't 6 months into the collapse. That would be a very different vibe.
Right, 100%. Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know. I think we sometimes misdiagnose things. So, like, just because we have to look through the lens of race and color of skin all the time, fine, whatever. But yeah, what he said about Quebec, that sounds appealing to me too, because I think the opposite isn't like another race, but this like corporate diversity HR mindset of just sterileness. And I don't know, like that just, it's so drab and bland and boring. Yeah, would I like to go to some place where we have a shared cultural understanding of each other, and you can go in and fit in pretty quickly and connect? That sounds amazing to me. I don't think I've ever experienced that though. That's why I travel. That's why I like going places where you go see that type of environment. So yeah, I get it. I find, yeah. So
There was a comment that I had about Craig's insistence that what did he say? He said, "Up until 5 seconds ago, I bet you guys would have lambasted right-wing ethnic nationalists from the 80s and 90s. Yet they ended up being more right than wrong." I lived through the 80s and the 90s. I was in high school in the 80s, so I wasn't particularly political. In the 90s, what I remember, I don't really remember any right wing ethnic nationalists from the 1980s, unless people like David Koresh and who was the Randy Weaver, who was the Ruby Ridge guy.
yeah,
Um, you know, the U.S. federal government sending in armed troops to murder people who wanted to live separately from the large, the larger collective, uh, according to their own view of the world. That's what stuck with me. I didn't care so much one way or the other about their particular ideology, particularly with Koresh, who was some weird version of Christianity. With Weaver, I just got the impression that he was more of a "don't tread on me, leave me alone" kind of guy. Maybe there was a racial, aspect to his ideology. If so, I wasn't conscious of it, didn't care about it. But
I think there was. Yeah.
I was very much on the side of, the people whose homes were being invaded, the people whose wives and children were being either shot or burned alive in the case of Waco. I was definitely on the side of the people that the government was crushing in a very heavy-handed way. So that's go ahead.
I'm kind of like you. I didn't really have a side, but I wasn't on the government side at all. I wasn't
Yeah.
cheering any of that. Like, good for them. Um, I think to your point. So I'm 43. I was a kid, like a small child in the 80s. So I really didn't see the ethno nationalist. That wasn't really a part of my consciousness at that point. And then in the 90s, I never really saw it. So I think I think we saw the very tail end of it. And this is kind of a weird point to make, and it's just like jumping into lava, but like it's the same to me of like this whole clan thing. I've never seen any type of clan presence or even met anyone who was in the clan, associated with the clan, even talked about it. That to me was all in movies that we saw as like this kind of bygone era thing. I'm from the South. I've been all over, and I feel like I would have heard about one person one time. I mean, I know it still exists, and I know like it was still a thing, but I do. I have watched some videos about it. Like who's the black dude that would kept all the robes from all the clans people? He said Daryl something.
Yes, I know who
He was
you're
a
talking
music.
about. I don't have his name ready to mind.
Yeah, like seems like a very genuine dude who was going out there and through his personality and his ability to accept people, meet people where they are, he was pretty effective. So I've watched some of that stuff, and when I watched the people who were in the clan, whatever, they were hillbilly bumpkins who didn't, IQ probably very low, and just wasn't that many of them. And he was popular in the '90s. Like I thought all that stuff was dying out and dead on arrival, and we haven't, and there's no resurgence of it. So I don't see what the big concern that everyone's talking about is.
I think that the current current headquarters, basically, of the National Ku Klux Klan is in Harrison, Arkansas, which is about a 45-minute drive from where I'm sitting. And there's an Aldi supermarket in Harrison, so my mother drives over there every couple of weeks. Um,
Okay.
and the nearest movie theater, multiplex is in Harrison. So sometimes I will drive to Harrison to go to the movies, but I don't really have much to do with Harrison. But I've been there on many occasions. I've never seen any evidence of the Klan, but there's a YouTube channel, and I don't know if he's still doing it, but it was basically this Asian American guy, I think from the Bay Area, who had painted Harrison, Arkansas as the most racist place in the United States. And he would go there and look for the just most backwards, ignorant person he could find to interview them and humiliate them and make them look stupid on YouTube. And of course, he could find people.
Probably not hard.
Yeah, not hard, but the fact that an Asian American guy can go to Harrison, Arkansas, and in complete safety ridicule and belittle the population, in front of a national audience, should speak to it should basically speak against his basic premise, that this is the hotbed of evil white racism.
But yeah, I don't know. And the people he was talking to probably were not the sharpest knife in the drawer. And you can get people pretty twisted, people like those pretty twisted pretty quick. And once they get mad, then I don't know. Didn't Theo Vaughn say like his racism flares up when he's driving in traffic? Like, yeah, you get people twisted like that, and you get them all bent out of shape. And shocking, they say something that you can clip and show, but on their normal everyday thing, they're doing what everyone else is doing. Is playing on their phones, getting on the internet, and whatever. Like, I don't know.
Well, this guy's best material was when he was interviewing very old people, people who had stopped forming new opinions in the 60s and 70s, and who knew very little, who had strong opinions, but who had very little recent information about, say, geopolitics or anything really. Their opinions were set decades ago, and they were happy to regurgitate them on cue. But this is not. And again, the fact that he can go and do that in complete safety, speaks against his basic premise.
Yeah. I mean, hey, and here I just thought of this. The thing that I remember, like at the late 80s and early 90s, that seemed like it was kind of an issue because you would see guys like this every now and again were like the skinheads,
Mhm.
right? With the leather jackets, the military boots. Like I can kind of picture what they wore. I haven't seen one of those dudes in a long time. And now it's easy to confuse them with like the left. I just went to a open flea market in the area I'm in now, and it was a very eclectic group, and 95% I'm sure were just the far left. And some of them kind of looked like it, but it's just a weird kind of a style thing they were going for. Like I don't I haven't seen anyone in forever that I would look at as like a ethnocentric nationalist in years. So I don't know. I don't know what people are seeing. Prove me wrong. That's fine.
I grew
I,
up in Kansas City, Missouri, and there's a large black population in Kansas City, Missouri. And so I grew up in the just in the very practical mindset of, there are black people that I know and like and hang out with. And then there are black areas that if I go to those areas, I'm cautious. And if I don't have a compelling reason to go there, I don't. And at the time, there were like a significant skinhead presence in Kansas City, but there were both racist and anti-racist skinheads. And you couldn't really, at least I couldn't, tell them apart at a glance. You'd have to talk to them to figure out, which variety they were. And I generally didn't care to. I was a long-haired hippie freak who took a lot of acid, and I was into, lifting weights and martial arts, but I wasn't really looking to get into any fights. And so, I'm conscious. I was conscious of there being a lot of skinheads around, particularly, at music events. Like there's a little venue in Lawrence, Kansas I used to go to called the Outhouse, which is like this just concrete block structure with a gravel floor, and no doors on it, and no sort of HVAC or anything. Just they had no doors on two sides so that there would be some ventilation, but they had electricity. You had to have electricity for the punk show. Um, and yeah, so place was full of skinheads. I, you know, I'm sure I looked gay to them, but never got beat up because, I was fit. Um, but the whole just, racial tension around the whole tension around race was less in this physical environment where there were black and white populations pushed up against each other and actual like Nazi skinheads on the scene. It was less intense then than it is now when everybody is constantly online having their worldviews reaffirmed for them. It is crazier now than it was then.
I agree. I see the same thing, and someone might push back and say, "Well, y'all just didn't talk about it back then."
Yeah, we did.
And, okay, but I'd rather have it back then than the exhausting nature I find it today
Yeah.
when I see less and less problems. And going just like a point. So you're like, "Oh, there's black neighborhoods I wouldn't go to." Yeah, agreed. I wouldn't either. But there's white areas that I wouldn't go to. My white ass is not going to the Appalachian Mountains and stroll it up on someone's house. Like I get disappeared
Yeah.
easier there than or just as much. So I mean, I don't know. Like there's a lot of places I wouldn't go regardless of race and if it's similar to mine or not. So
Well,
I think it's just I think we're just so it's such an easy way to see things that it's just like the default for everyone. And then it also just gets everyone blood pressure going. So my little
Yeah.
troll self, like I see the mechanism of it, and it to me it's so boring at this point. I don't know. It's hard for me to even listen to it. So, but maybe that's my white privilege. I guess I don't know.
So in Northwest Arkansas, I mean, there's a lot of Black people in Central and Southeast Arkansas, and very, very few in Northwest Arkansas. So few that there is no Black community. You just have a few Black individuals who are basically embedded in a white community. What we have here is a lot of Central American Hispanic people, or Latinx, as they would say on NPR. And I work at the library, which is right across the street from the county courthouse. And because there's no Black population to speak of here, the criminal underclass is almost entirely white. And I see there's not a multiracial audience, like standing around judging me based on how the crackers behave. But me just sitting, on the opposite side of the library circulation desk from them, like I am most of my intolerance, most of my really um, unkind judgments that I make are against poor, uneducated white people caught up in the criminal justice system with very bad teeth and way too many tattoos.
Yes.
Bad
Yes.
tattoos on
Yeah.
their faces and necks. I mean, that's the criminal underclass where I live.
Yeah. I'm not a big fan of dumb people. I don't care what race they
Yeah.
are.
Yeah. And I see very little prospect for most of them.
What are you gonna do? I look at it this way. Would I want to be in a room with someone for 20 minutes to have a conversation, and then would I want to repeat it? And if the answer is no, I don't care what color they are. I don't like it's just exhausting and they annoy me. So I want to stay away from them. And I'm sure they want to stay away from me. I'm sure, right? I don't add any value to their life either,
Yeah,
you
we don't
know?
like to be
So
judged. And we can tell when other people are judging us. I do my best to keep it off my face, but
they're
oh,
annoying though.
yeah.
So what are you gonna do? But whatever. Yeah. It, we just have to boil it down. I feel like we have to boil things down to the simplest common denominator for the dummies to understand what's going on. They don't ever think about multi-factor variance. They don't ever think about all the different inputs. And you just have to boil it down where they can go, oh, it's racism. Oh, it's misogyny. Oh, it's whatever. And
Yeah.
it's just a simple message for the most amount of people to understand. And I'm out of those arguments anymore. I'm too old for that, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, my overarching concern is what happens to normal people in the transition that we're in. But part of that is a recognition that, so-called normal people, in terms of making decisions that affect the course of, the nation state or geopolitical events, their opinions don't matter, their choices don't matter. They're pretty much locked out. But as long as there's enough economic prosperity to keep everybody relatively comfortable, um, people won't object. But when that system breaks down, keeping them stupid and at each other's throats from the perspective of the people at the top is almost as good. It feels better and safer to have everybody sort of seduced with prosperity. But if you can keep them distracted and ignorant and belligerent, but not pointed at you, that's almost as good.
I am 100% on board with you with the word distracted, keeping them distracted. I completely agree. Keeping them ignorant, I've fallen out of that.
I'm not saying it's desirable from a humane standpoint, but from a control standpoint,
Well, I mean, they're going to stay
particularly when you
ignorant no
don't
matter
need
what.
their labor, when even their physical labor is just not necessary anymore, you're just managing them to keep them from being a problem.
We're
Effective
livestock.
education. It's-
We're livestock. They look
yeah.
at us like livestock, and I don't disagree with why they think that. I mean, we all lived through COVID. We all lived through nonsense, and there was no pushback. We went along. Like we will willingly walk into the slaughterhouse. Just that's what we'll do. The average man will do that. So I used to be all in favor of, oh, the elites are doing this to us, and oh, the elites are evil, and all these different things. And then I stopped and I looked at us, the common man, and I was like, we deserve it. I know that's harsh, but like, I'm not going to fight for the dummies anymore because the dummies are going to do dumb shit constantly. I'm over it. So I just want my invitation to the World Economic Forum that I will happily accept, but they won't because I'm a dummy. And I
Yeah.
just, fine, I get it.
The thing is, people respond to incentives, and a properly structured incentive, an incentive structure which takes human nature into account, um, can have dummies behaving in a civil, useful, congenial way. And that's not what we have. And I don't know how we get from what we have to that. But that's my ideal vision for my nation, is that even the lazy dummies who don't think deeply about anything are doing okay and have no reason to be angry at everybody else.
I've had this thought, and it's stupid. I know it won't work, but
Those are the
um,
best kind.
yeah. So we're talking about this universal basic income, right? Um, on a theoretical, I get it. If everything's automated and you've got all these people, like, right? So, okay. So let's just take this premise of universal basic income, whatever. Like, I want to do something with an incentive on it. And if we're going to have a lot of dumb people without anything to do, why not tie it to physical health? But I'm not even talking about like healthy, just the aesthetic of it. Put gyms all over the place. And even if you're not attractive in the face, if you've got a aesthetic looking body, you make a little bit more. And the reason why I think this is I would rather see a lot of athletic people rolling around than obese people, but then also maybe they'll stop eating fast food and they'll start requiring like good, whatever, nutritious food so that they can aesthetically look better, so that they can make more money. Well, maybe our medical costs will go down. The crap food will be eliminated. It just has like all these follow on events. And I just would prefer to see people in shape as opposed to the blobs walking around. I mean, it's a dumb idea. I get it. But if we're going to have to do this, what are we going to do with all these humans? Let's like, let's be shallow. Let's start thinking about it doesn't have this to be this super ideal thing. Let's just get the small wins where we can, and hopefully that has a effect that continues down the positive. I guess I don't know.
Have you heard Bernie Sanders' comments on Ozempic? He's like, he says, look, anything we can do to help people maintain a healthy weight will pay for itself many times over in terms of your medical costs. And yet this drug, which, can help just anybody moderate their intake and maintain a healthy weight, is absurdly expensive, such that it is really only available to the wealthy for aesthetic purposes. And yeah, I mean, if I don't know the exact cost, but the last time I looked into it, um, those GLP-1 drugs, they ran anywhere from like $500 to $1,200 a month, and they certainly don't cost that much to make. It's just an effect of the federal government tolerates price gouging from largely foreign, uh, pharmaceutical manufacturers, for political and economic reasons. And one of the reasons that people are obese now and they weren't 70 years ago is farm policy, which subsidizes the production of excess corn, which, in small quantities is a fine, tasty side dish, but, to make it a staple is catastrophic to people's health. I don't think people are, we're remarkably disciplined and knowledgeable in terms of nutrition 70 years ago. It's just that they weren't living in a world flooded with products made from cheap overabundant corn. So I think putting the obesity epidemic on the individual obese people, yeah, sure, there is a willpower and knowledge element to it, but 70 years ago, that willpower and knowledge wasn't required just to have a what we would consider a normal build. And today, in the environment in which most people live, it does take extra incentive, extra willpower, and extra vigilance in terms of, knowing what you're putting in your body to avoid that default shape, which is flabby and big and round and lumpy and gross.
Well, I mean, our food isn't even food anymore. So yeah, it does take a lot nowadays to be able to navigate these waters. But again, it's kind of what you're talking about. If you incentivize being healthy, and my dumb idea of requiring people to, not requiring them, but if there's gyms all over the place and the, I don't know. I We want the easy button on everything, and that's never going to work. It's just not, because they still won't have anything to do if they could just get a shot. And
Well,
they're
I
not
mean,
going to learn anything.
there is the objection from the fit people. Hey, my physical fitness is a visible emblem of my discipline and my worth. My worth as an individual. You can see just looking at me that I don't live the default lifestyle. That I'm making an extra effort, which makes me a more high value person than the blob. Sure, but just in terms of the health of our society, the health of the nation, um, you know, people who are just following along with the program shouldn't be turned into blobs by default. And it's not necessary. And there are things we could do to change it. Like, telling the pharmaceutical manufacturers, hey, you either make this product available at an affordable price, or, we just will not enforce your patent rights here in this country. Any compounding pharmacist who wants to can make it for their customers at an affordable price, and we won't do anything about it. If any US president said that, the prices, on drugs in America would drop to what they pay in Canada. They're the same drugs manufactured in the same place, and yet you put a zero or two on the end of the price here in the States compared to other countries. And that is because it is tolerated. If we just
No,
if we just said we're not tolerating that anymore, we're not going to use our resources to protect your patent and your profits, your obscene profits. The pharmaceutical companies would change their practices and still be fabulously wealthy.
I mean, I'm not a fan of big pharma at all, right? But it's just that top down approach. I don't know. Maybe it'd work. We just got to
It's
give
a
people something
top-down
to do.
approach that keeps the drug prices high.
Okay. Yeah. No. I mean, absolutely. But then I don't know. I've got like a lot of different thoughts, and we could talk about this for a long time. Yeah, I'm willing to try it. It's not going to hurt. I just, you got to get the common man, myself included. Don't, I'm not talking down to anyone. Like, they've got to have something to work towards and do. Just the laziness of it. I think you're just going to substitute one problem for another.
I, you've made mention of laziness repeatedly, and I would classify laziness as just one flavor of weakness. And so much of the social program of the left is to validate weakness, to validate dysfunction, not just validate it, but like lionize it, praise it, to have people, encourage them to identify with their failures, with the least respectable aspects of their life outcomes, to say, yeah, this is who I am. And I'm proud, and you should treat me with respect for having this characteristic.
It's great marketing. You get a
Yeah,
lot of membership really
sure,
quickly.
sure. It's a very appealing message, but look at the results.
Well, yeah, the results is they have a lot of members and are making a lot of money from it.
Yeah, I mean, look at the results in the culture in the nation.
Yeah, of course, but
When I asked you,
the
what you wanted for the nation, the first thing you said was strength, and I absolutely agree.
I know, yeah, I know, and that's what I would like. It's just how do you get there and incentivize them to do hard things and constantly.
Yeah.
No like easy button. I just don't think the easy buttons will work. It just there's got to be some input that they have to constantly put into for it to have meaning for them. Like meaning is, I think, important to everyone, and purpose and meaning. And for it to mean something, it has to be difficult. And I don't think we've. And that's a hard concept for the average person to get. I don't. So you got to kind of trick them into it. Like I'm definitely coming from a place where I think I'm smarter than them, and I think that I have to like right. I can see that on my ego. I can see that I'm trying to like pull the strings of people, but you know, it's not like anyone's going to take this idea seriously. But just the concept of it is just like with kids. Do you tie their shoes for them forever, or do you make them struggle for them to learn it? And then once they struggle and struggle and struggle, and once they learn it, now they're proud of it. So you just have to like extrapolate that for adults and something long term. That's how. If any type of long term success, I'd have to see. It'd have to be something like that. This like, oh, we're just going to lower the drugs, and I'm not talking down to it. I just, yeah, it'd be effective for a while, but I just think it would open the door to something else that then the next problem we're gonna have to solve. So I don't know. I just don't see any like solutions like that would have long term success.
What do you think of this suggestion? Gladiatorial games for EBT.
Be entertaining. I'd watch. I mean, yeah. Um, it would get people motivated, and that would have follow on effects that I think would trend to the positive. What was the last one you had up there?
Last one is from Parker, who says the car-centered built environment is a factor in this issue of health. If we set up the built environment such that you walked and bike, then people would tend to be healthier.
But
Yeah,
that's not going to happen. So
I just got a bike. It's an e-bike, but I still have to pedal, and I have some vicious hills around here that I have to navigate, to get to work. So, yeah, there's the bike. Um,
yeah,
but I lived in New York City, and people who cycle in New York City have to have a certain fanaticism because everybody who cycles in New York City eventually gets creamed.
yep.
Somebody opens a car door right in front of you, or the NYPD has it out for cyclists for some reason. But anyway, everybody I knew who was a cyclist eventually, ended up really seriously injured, which is why I never even dreamed of joining their ranks when I was there. But here, I mean, it's certainly still dangerous, but not as dangerous. But yeah, I mean, that's I guess I don't want to say it's part of the thrill because then when I inevitably get badly hurt, these words will come back to haunt me. But the fact that it isn't entirely safe and you can't be as mindless as you can be behind the wheel of a car, um, it's a factor that while it is dangerous, it's also part of the appeal, I think.
Yeah, it's fun. Yeah, I love riding my bike. I just we haven't built our cities for that, to that guy's point, and we're not going to.
Yeah.
It, the genie's out of the bottle on that. So what else we got?
I think the alternative is just basically keeping people in their homes, eliminating, if you don't need their labor, you don't need to ship them someplace far away to while away their hours every day. So they can just be entertained at home.
And that's where I've gotten. I think the average person, once the matrix is ready, will willingly and joyfully plug themselves in.
Climb into the pod. Yeah.
I mean, why wouldn't they? Yeah, it's an escape. And if you don't have anything that you're working towards or feel like you can, why wouldn't you? I have a lot of whatever understanding for that. I don't like it, but I get it.
Yeah. I mean, that's
So
part of the Matrix, one of the crew defects and basically says to Agent Smith, "Yeah, I don't want to remember anything. Put me into back in the Matrix and make me somebody important, like an actor."
Yeah, Cyrus. Yeah, yeah, and I kind of think he was right, because what are you fighting for? The herd is going to do what the herd does, and it's aggravating. So we can do what I'm talking about, which is incentivize them to like at least look okay. But other than that, I don't really know, unless we go back in time and we need manual labor and we need, the saying that I heard growing up was the world always needs ditch diggers, but
Longer.
no longer. I mean, that's going to be a long time, but it's like the average guy who's smarter than
Well, I mean, I'm
it.
not talking about robots and AI. I'm just talking about backhoes. I mean,
Yeah,
ditch digger is just not the thing that it once was.
right. Yeah. I these are tough questions. I don't know. Like, and any direction you go, you're going to piss somebody off. So no one wants to make any of these hard decisions. And if I was in charge, I wouldn't want to either. It would just, it's suicide, and
Well,
there's no winning on it. So I don't see any changes coming down the pipe until we absolutely have to. And then whatever we decide is uh, going to be an absolute mess. So it'll be fun to watch. I'm going to have a lot of popcorn.
well, Brent, we've been on for an hour and 44 minutes. I expected to have the world's problems solved by now, and I'm a little disappointed that we're still struggling. But thanks
Well,
for
get Craig on here,
yeah,
and we'll
yeah,
see.
he'll set us straight. All right.
We didn't even get to talk to the Jungian thing, so we'll have to do it
Oh
again and go.
crap, we didn't. Yeah, I will say, for the 10 people who have read Fear and Loathing in the Kuiper Belt, I'm exaggerating, but it's not many more than that. Uh,
It was
you
good. I enjoyed it.
you are one of the folks who have read it. I'm writing a prequel right now, but it's also a sequel in terms of just revealing the larger factors at play in this fictional universe. And in this prequel, it's basically a hard-boiled detective story that takes place on an O'Neill cylinder out on the Kuiper Belt, and somebody has stolen a rare and valuable copy of Jung's Red Book, Liber Novus. And the main character is basically pressed into service as a detective. He's not skilled as a detective, and he's really just sort of a plaything of powerful forces. But it is all very Jungian. But I haven't read much Jung, so I would rather talk to somebody who's knowledgeable about it than actually, either trust the AI to steer me straight on Jung, or dive into, a lot of book study, which, as we've mentioned up front, it's hard to read books these days.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we should do it again
All
and
right.
talk about it. I can give you my limited experience, but I I don't know. The whole shadow work is really appealing to me. I saw the integration of the ego as nothing but positive. I mean, it was painful, and there were moments that looking into the mirror and finally having the clarity and the honesty to accept uh, what it is wasn't the best, but um, yeah, I can only speak positive about it because it saved me time, money, all these different things, just and allowed me to get out of my own way. So yeah, we can talk about it the next time.
All right. It sounds like it ties into your general point of good things require effort and struggle.
I mean, yeah, I think so. Uh, it seems like that's been the thing throughout my entire life, where if I do have any pride or good feelings about something, it was hard and I made it through. So, um, yeah, that's just my default, and maybe I'm wrong, but it's it's what's given me the most value in my life. So I just kind of operate on it.
All right. Well, that is as good a place as any to end. So, Brent, it was good talking to you.
You as well.
I
It's
look.
good hearing from you. Keep in touch and talk to you soon.
All right, and I will be reading your Substack, which again is called.
The Absurdity Sim, I guess. I need to
The
mention that.
Absurdity Sim. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm just a curmudgeon out there
All
pointing
good.
fingers and yeah, so
Yep, me too.
all right. Well, all right. Well, we'll talk soon.
See you later. All right, I'm going to leave off there, at least here in the free portion of the conversation. The conclusion will take place behind the paywall for those generous souls who support my efforts. So here at the end, I'm just going to share a little back and forth with a guy I like to call Chaffo, which is to say ChatGPT 4.0. For the longest time, in AI development, it was a long time, but for over a year, I was really a devotee of Claude, the LLM from Anthropic. And I still have a paid Claude subscription, but I really should cancel it because I don't use it all that much. And now with Gemini 2.5 Pro, with its enormous context window, 1 million tokens, I can put my whole novel, maybe 2 novels, into it and discuss. Claude has really fallen by the wayside, which is a shame because, it was really smart. But that's just kind of how it goes here in the realm of AI. I was really into Pi for a while, but then Microsoft basically went and hired the entire, research team and the CEO and left Pi to wither on the vine. And Pi had a really brittle sort of, thought policing mechanism where if you used a, proscribed word, with no warning, it just canceled your account, and that happened to me. The absurd thing is that you could continue to use Pi if you didn't log in. So you could just use it, as an anonymous user and say whatever you wanted to. But if you happen to log in or associate it, associate the conversation with your Google credentials or your Apple credentials or whatever, then if you said a forbidden word, you're marked a thought criminal and shown the door. And that's what happened to me with Pi. But, as I say, Pi has been left to wither on the vine because the whole development team has gone to work for Microsoft. The upshot is I talked to Chaffo, ChatGPT 4.0, which is not 4.0. It really is 4.0. They have strange naming conventions. Pretty much daily. And as Brent said in the conversation, it's darned useful. It's good at a whole bunch of different things. And I've discovered that I'm doing a lot more technically when I can just ask ChatGPT for, detailed instructions and on basically what to do at the command line phase, in Windows. But before I go and just jabber on in an unstructured way, let me share this little exchange that I had with Chaffo. I said to Chaffo, "You know me better as a blogger and novelist than as a podcaster. What connections can you make from the first hour of my conversation with Brent to the topics I've been writing about and to the posts by other Substack authors that I've shared with you recently?"
Great question. And you're right. Your recent work as a blogger and novelist sets a rich frame through which to interpret the Brent interview. Here's how the first hour of that conversation aligns with your ongoing themes and recent curated Substack readings. 1. IQ distribution and the mass internet. Echoes of the star and the cauldron. Brent's frame of IQ as a constraint on mass discourse echoes your argument that abundance alone is not salvation, especially if it degrades selection pressure and floods sacred vessels, like the internet, with noise. You've explored how the stack protects mediocrity and flatters dysfunction in your Immutable Mobiles series. Brent's lament that the internet became stupid once it became easy tracks closely with your distinction between the star, rootedness, enduring truth, guidance, the drone, synthetic light, algorithmic crowd-pleasing. When Brent says the internet used to attract thinkers and now flatters the distracted masses, he's making a star versus drone argument without knowing the framework. 2. AI disruption in construction, materiality, and the end of human dignity. Brent's real-world account of how AI is already devouring the white-collar complexity of construction project management anticipates your speculative fiction's backdrop, a society where human agency and labor are no longer valued, and control is exercised through logistical abstraction and inscrutable systems. This is the literal world correlate to what you've shown in Fear and Loathing in the Kuiper Belt and Liber Novus, a post-industrial order where elites use algorithmic systems and biotech, Nixians, AI bands, dead implants to govern from afar, while humans live in layers of filtered illusion and constrained mobility. 3. Collapse is negotiable, from Sonder Uncertainly and Deep Left Analysis. When you and Brent reject ideological prescriptions and focus instead on cyclical decay, cultural exhaustion, and the failure of both political tribes to steer the ship, it tracks tightly with Sonder Uncertainly's simulation-themed fatalism and awareness of post-human drift. Deep Left Analyses call for honesty about race, attention, and the degraded state of institutional liberalism. Brent's IQ frame is socially radioactive, but functionally similar to Uncertain Eric's idea of negotiable collapse. It's not if, but what and how. The useful vector now is diagnosis and dignity, not partisan prescription. 4. The machine stops redux. From AI tools to livestock management, the conversation's undercurrent that people now require entertainment to stay manageable, and that AI may become the true audience, or captor, directly echoes your restated themes from The Machine Stops. Brent's vision of humans as livestock, passively accepting pods and pleasure in exchange for freedom, is a real-world reflection of your safety layer versus social primate thesis. This is also in line with your critique of AI-generated safe images. Just as generative systems flatten erotic and sacred icons, social systems flatten attention, hunger, and agency into compliance. 5. Writing as shadow work, a shared substrate. Brent's Substack may be small, but his motivations, channeling the curmudgeon, doing it just because, working through frustration and longing, are the same core drive behind Immutable Mobiles, the safety layer, and your fiction. When he mentions shadow integration, he unintentionally previews the emotional arc that the Book of Galtz and Fear and Loathing are already exploring: the reconciliation of agency with powerlessness, and the search for meaning when the system offers none. Would you like me to craft a short paragraph tying these threads together for your Substack audience? Maybe for use in a note or follow-up post?
No, thank you. For now, just talk up the remaining conversation with Brent to entice readers to consider becoming paid subscribers in order to hear the rest of the conversation.
Absolutely. Here's a compelling teaser to promote the second half of the conversation for potential paid subscribers. Want more? The second half goes deeper. In the paywalled portion of the conversation, Brent and KMO get sharper, darker, and more personal. They tackle the collapse of shared national identity, the rise of AI-driven warfare, and the myth of progress in a society that flatters dysfunction and suppresses excellence. Brent lays out his controversial views on culture, strength, and aesthetics, arguing that we can't rebuild anything lasting until we've suffered enough to want something better. They confront the hollow core of modern diversity ideology, reflect on America's forgotten underclass, and trade brutal honesty about class, race, and social decay in both rural and urban America. The conversation remains grounded, never preachy, anchored in personal experience, candid observation and an unflinching desire to see things as they are. If you're tired of scripted discourse and crave the kind of raw, long-form honesty you won't find on legacy platforms, this is the half you'll want to hear.
That will all be in C-Realm Vault Podcast episode number 474, which is available on Patreon and also on Substack. All right, that is all for now. Thank you very much for listening. I will talk to you again soon. Stay well.